He couldn't see the board, but I was the only one who noticed. Everyone said I overreacted when I got my son glasses after the school flagged a vision issue. But when even his own grandmother started sabotaging his treatment and my wife began siding with her, I realized I wasn't just fighting blurry eyesight. I was fighting a family that refused to see the truth. I didn't expect a simple piece of paper from my son's school to ignite a quiet war in my own home. But here we are. It started with an eye exam slip. You know, one of those standard vision checks they do in elementary school, the kind that gets stuffed into a backpack between crumpled worksheets and forgotten lunch wrappers. My son, let's call him Jamie, walked in the door and casually handed it to me like it was nothing. But I saw the words in bold recommendation for further vision screening. I didn't panic. My older son, Leo, wears glasses. We caught his nearsightedness early, and now it's just part of his everyday life. So when I saw that Jamie might be following the same path, I didn't hesitate. I booked the appointment at a local optometry clinic in the mall. No drama, no fuss, just action. The optometrist was thorough tests, eye drops, digital scans, the whole shebang. When it was over, the results were clear. Jamie was 1/6 in both eyes. Mild to moderate myopia. The doctor explained it carefully how it affects distance vision, especially in a classroom. Chalkboards, projectors, blurry reading and writing up. Close, no issue. But the real takeaway, he needed glasses, so I got them. Simple black frames, durable, comfortable, and something Jamie liked. He even seemed excited to wear them. That first week, he was thrilled. I can see the board now. Dad, he shouted after school. I smiled, reassured we'd done the right thing. But that peace was short-lived. It started subtly, an offhand comment here, a raised eyebrow. There, and it all came from one source, my mother-in-law. Now, let me explain something about her. She was once an eye nurse, decades ago. And while that background should lend her credibility, it's paired with a personality that's hard to tolerate. She's the kind of person who is never wrong, even when the facts stare her in the face. You can show her data expert opinions, even God himself descending from the clouds, and she'd still say, well, if it were me? So imagine my surprise when I find out she's been removing Jamie's glasses every time she takes him out. Not asking, not suggesting, just taking them off his face and telling him, you don't need those. At first, I thought Jamie was forgetting. Kids are careless. But then he admitted, Grandma says my eyes will get lazy if I wear them too much. I was stunned. Furious and confused. I brought it up with my wife gently at first. But the moment I said her mom's name, her face closed like a book. She's just old-fashioned. She said she worked in eye care, remember? Yes, I remembered. And I remembered the last time she ignored medical advice when Leo had to get his tonsils removed, and she tried to cancel the surgery behind our backs. But this time, it was different. This wasn't just a clash of opinions. This was about our child's health and his vision. Days passed, then weeks, and I started noticing something even more troubling. My wife was changing. She wasn't as strict about Jamie wearing his glasses in the morning. Once she even left for a playdate without checking if he had them. When I confronted her, she got defensive. He sees fine. She snapped. Stop making this a big deal, but it was a big deal. I started to feel like I was living in some bizarre twilight zone where facts no longer mattered. My son needed glasses. He was prescribed glasses. But now even my wife was treating them like an optional accessory, and it all traced back to one woman, my mother-in-law, and her stubborn, unshakable arrogance. Here's the thing I don't like. Conflict. I don't want my marriage to be a battleground. But what do you do when protecting your child puts you at odds with your own family? I found myself lying awake at night, questions circling like vultures. Was I overreacting? Was this really that serious? Was I undermining my wife by pushing so hard? Then Jamie came home from school one day, squinting at the TV. He sat barely 3 feet from the screen, blinking like it hurt, and I lost it. Not at him, but at the situation. This wasn't a theory. This wasn't opinion. This was my son, visibly struggling to see, because the adults around him couldn't agree on what was best. That night, I made a decision. I booked another eye appointment, not to question the diagnosis, but to settle this ridiculous argument. Once and for all, I told my wife we'd both go. I wanted her to hear it straight from a professional. I wanted this dispute out in the open with facts, not family pride guiding the outcome. She said fine. But the way she said it, tight lips, cold eyes, I knew she thought I was attacking her. Maybe I was, or maybe just Maybe I was finally standing up for what mattered, not for my pride, not to win a fight, but for Jamie. Because he deserves to see the world clearly. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's narrative, so be it. The waiting room was silent, except for the muffled tapping of Jamie's sneakers on the tiled floor. He was swinging his legs, clutching his glasses case in his lap like it was some fragile artifact. My wife sat on the opposite side of him, arms folded, scrolling through her phone with a clenched jaw. She hadn't really spoken to me since I booked this appointment. I could practically feel her disapproval radiating off her skin. This wasn't how I imagined a responsible co-parenting moment would go. I thought we'd both be sitting here concerned for our son, eager for clarity. Instead, it felt like we were waiting for a courtroom verdict, and I was the one on trial. The receptionist finally called Jamie's name, and we followed the optometrist into a clean, softly lit exam room. The new doctor, Dr. Ellis, greeted Jamie with a warm smile, calm and disarming. I chose her on purpose. Independent clinic, well-reviewed. No ties to our previous optometrist. I needed this to be objective, bulletproof. She ran Jamie through the usual tests, visual acuity charts, auto-refractor measurements, pupil response checks. I could see my son trying his best, his little brow furrowed in concentration. He squinted at the tiny letters. When he didn't have his glasses on, he mixed up the F's and the P's. When he wore them, the squinting vanished. I watched as Dr. Ellis took notes, then turned to us. "Well," she said, glancing at Jamie fondly, "your son's prescription is accurate. He's mildly nearsighted around 1/6 in both eyes. Glasses will help him see distant objects more clearly, which is important for things like reading the board at school or recognizing faces from a distance." My wife nodded slowly, saying nothing. I leaned forward, and if he doesn't wear his glasses consistently, I asked. My tone probably came out sharper than I intended. Dr. Ellis paused for a moment, clearly sensing the tension. It won't make his vision worse per se, but inconsistent use can cause unnecessary eye strain and headaches. And if he's straining to see all day, especially in school, it can absolutely impact his learning and behavior. Plus, children can become self-conscious if they're always behind in class. My wife shifted in her seat. And no, Dr. Ellis added gently, wearing glasses does not weaken the eyes. That's a myth. Wearing the correct prescription allows the eyes to function properly. Not wearing them when needed is far more harmful. That was it. Fact, professional opinion, case closed. Jamie left the room with a smile, proudly wearing his glasses, as we headed toward the parking lot. But my wife barely said a word, the whole walk. When we got into the car, I finally broke the silence. "So, does that settle it?" She let out a bitter little laugh and stared out the window. "I guess now you feel vindicated." This wasn't about me. I snapped louder than I meant to. This was about Jamie. His vision. His health. "You've been letting your mom." Don't she cut in sharply. "Don't blame her for everything." I gripped the steering wheel jaw tight. "She's been telling Jamie not to wear his glasses, actively undermining medical advice. How is that okay?" "She's worried," my wife shot back. "She's old school, yes, but she worked in this field for years. She's not trying to hurt him. She just doesn't want him dependent on glasses if he doesn't have to be." "Dependent?" I repeated, incredulous. "This isn't a crutch. It's a tool. You don't choose nearsightedness. You manage it." There was a long silence. I could feel us drifting in two separate currents. She, with her mother's influence, me with my stubborn resolve. And poor Jamie caught somewhere in the undertow, just trying to see the world clearly. When we got home, she went straight to our room and shut the door. Jamie went to the living room and turned on his cartoons. He wore his glasses the whole time. That night, I lay awake thinking about how something as simple as a pair of lenses had cracked open the fault lines in our marriage. It wasn't just about eyesight anymore. It was about control, influence, trust. How many other decisions had we been making around our children that were skewed by outside interference? And worse, how often had I stayed silent, letting things slide just to keep the peace? I didn't know the answers. But I knew one thing: this couldn't continue. I wasn't going to sit back and watch my son's needs get shuffled under family politics. The next morning, I made another decision. It was time to confront her, my mother-in-law, because if clarity was what we were fighting for, then it was time to rip off the blindfolds. I told myself I wouldn't raise my voice, that I'd stay calm, collected, civil. But the moment my mother-in-law opened her front door with that patronizing half smile, the kind she wears like perfume, something inside me buckled. "Ah," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Come to lecture me, have you?" She already knew why I was there. Her living room smelled faintly of lavender and something overcooked. She was baking again, a tray of scones cooling by the window like we were in some peaceful English novel, not a real-life family tug-of-war over a child's well-being. She offered me one. I didn't take it. I'm here to talk about Jamie. I said, standing instead of sitting. I needed the edge. She moved, slowly, deliberately, sitting in her favorite chair like a queen on her throne. Is he all right? She asked, voice dripping with false innocence. You know exactly what this is about. That smile twitched. If it's about the glasses, I already explained to my daughter. Your daughter, I cut in, isn't the only parent here. Her expression hardened, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the steel beneath. I'm just trying to protect him. You're turning a small issue into a crisis. Children adapt. A little nearsightedness doesn't mean he has to rely on glasses all the time. You're not a doctor anymore. That did it. Her face flushed, but she didn't yell. She never yelled. No, she wielded guilt like a scalpel. I've seen cases worse than Jamie's, she said coolly. Back when I worked in pediatric care, we didn't rush to slap glasses on every child who couldn't read the tiniest letters on the chart. You mean 30 years ago, I shot back. Medical advice evolves. You're clinging to outdated theories because it makes you feel like you still have authority. But this isn't about your career. It's about my son. And what would you know about what's best for him? She snapped. You march him to some chain store optician, don't even consult the family, and then act surprised when people question your judgment. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I did what needed to be done. His prescription is real. The strain is real. But instead of supporting him, you tell him he doesn't need help. You make him doubt his own experience. She folded her arms. You're just angry that I challenged you. No, I said, my voice quieter now, trembling with the truth I'd been holding back. I'm angry that Jamie has to live in a house where grown adults play tug-of-war with his health like it's a power game. Her eyes narrowed. So, this is about your wife now. It's about all of us, I said. You're not just undermining me, you're undermining Jamie's trust. What happens when he grows up and doesn't know who to believe? When he questions his instincts because someone he loves keeps telling him he's wrong even when he's not? That landed. I saw it flicker behind her eyes. Guilt. Maybe even shame. But instead of backing down, she did what she always did, retreated behind her wall of pride. If you want to run your household like a dictatorship, she said icily, that's your business. But don't expect me to pretend like I agree with everything you do. You don't have to agree, I said. You just have to stop interfering. We stood in silence. The scones on the windowsill were starting to deflate. The air between us had gone brittle. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. You think I'm the problem, she whispered. But what if it's not just me? What are you talking about? She looked up at me, eyes colder than before. Do you really think your wife is just being influenced by me? Maybe she agrees with me more than you think. Maybe she doesn't trust your decisions either. That one hit like a sucker punch and it left a wound. I wasn't ready to admit to. I left without another word. My hands were shaking as I closed the car door. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the windshield. Not as a father, not as a husband, but as a man realizing he might be losing control of everything he thought he was protecting. When I walked back into the house, it was quiet unnervingly, so the TV was off. No cartoons echoing through the walls. Jamie's backpack sat by the door, glasses case balanced neatly on top. I could hear the sound of dishes clinking faintly from the kitchen. My wife was cleaning. That was her default when emotions ran high. Scrub until the silence drowned everything else out. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her, the way she wiped the same spot on the counter, over and over. The tension in her shoulders, the way she didn't even look up when she asked, "You talked to my mom, didn't you?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because the wrong word now might make things worse than they already were. I did, I finally said. We had a long conversation. She nodded, rinsed the glass, then said flatly, "Did you go there to fix things or prove you were right?" I blinked. Is that seriously what you think this is about? She turned, arms crossed, wet sponge still in hand. You didn't include me in the decision. You never even brought it up before booking the appointment. Just like the first time you got him glasses. That's because someone needed to act. I said louder than I intended. Our son couldn't see the board in class. He was straining his eyes and getting headaches. What did you want me to do? Wait until your mom gave us permission? No, she snapped. I wanted you to treat me like his mother, not just some obstacle in your path. The words hit me square in the chest, not because they were unfair, but because part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. I didn't mean to push you out, I said, my voice lowering. I've seen this pattern before. Your mom thinks she knows best. And sometimes you let her, even when it's hurting someone else. She looked away, biting her lip. She was a nurse for 30 years. She's not just some meddling old woman. She actually cared for people. I'm sure she did. I said softer now, but this isn't about her patients. This is about Jamie, our son. And she's been telling him he doesn't need glasses when doctors have said otherwise. That's not caring. That's denial dressed as wisdom. We stood in silence again. I could hear Jamie humming softly upstairs, probably building something out of Legos, blissfully unaware of how shaky the ground beneath him was. She said something to me. I continued, hesitant now. She said, Maybe you don't fully trust my decisions either. Is that true? My wife's eyes met mine, and for a second, the defensiveness fell away. She looked tired. Not just physically, but emotionally worn down. Like she'd been holding up a wall for so long, she didn't know how to lower it without everything crashing around her. I don't always know who to trust, she admitted quietly. You act fast, and sometimes that scares me. But Mom, she's always been confident. And yeah, maybe I lean on her too much. Maybe I let her speak louder than she should. Her voice cracked a little, but I never meant to hurt Jamie or you. I stepped closer, placing a hand on the counter between us. We've got to be on the same side, not just when it's easy, especially when it's hard. I need to know you're with me when I'm fighting for our son. She nodded slowly, tears starting to well. I think I needed to be reminded that being a good parent doesn't mean being right all the time. I reached out and took her hand. It means doing what's best for him, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it makes us question people we love. There, in that moment, something shifted. Not everything was fixed. There were still words unsaid, fences to mend, boundaries to draw, but for the first time in weeks, it felt like we were back on the same side of the glass, seeing things with the same clarity. That night, we tucked Jamie into bed together. He wore his glasses, smiling, as he pointed at the stars stuck to his ceiling. They're way clearer now, he whispered. And just like that, I realized something important. Sometimes doing the right thing feels like tearing your own house apart, but sometimes it's the only way to rebuild it stronger. The next morning, I didn't go to work, neither did my wife. We sat at the kitchen table, bleary-eyed and emotionally drained, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, but it wasn't silence this time. It was preparation, a quiet before the storm. We both knew had to come. I think we need to talk to her together, my wife said. I nodded. It has to be both of us. She needs to hear it from you too. She flinched a little at that, but didn't disagree. Maybe last night's conversation had really sunk in. Maybe she was ready to stop letting her mother's voice drown out her own. We called her that afternoon, invited her over for tea. No threats, no accusations, just a calm invitation. She agreed, of course. Why wouldn't she? In her mind, she was still the authority, still the one who knew best. When she arrived, she wore that same saccharine smile, the one that used to charm nurses and neighbors, and for a long time, her daughter. She brought a box of biscuits. Like this was a casual visit. Jamie peeked around the corner and waved. She grinned and called out to him. Jamie, sweetheart, don't you look so handsome without those silly. Stop, my wife said. Her mother froze mid-sentence. You don't get to talk about his glasses anymore. She added, firmer than I'd ever heard her be with her mother. We need to talk. Sit down. The look on my mother-in-law's face was hard to describe. Part offense, part disbelief, part fear. Maybe the kind of fear that only shows when control begins to slip away. She sat slowly, setting her biscuits down like a peace offering. What's all this about? She asked. I'm going to be direct, I said. Jamie's eye condition is real. The glasses aren't optional. We're not going to pretend otherwise, just to make anyone more comfortable. She opened her mouth to argue, but my wife cut her off. I let it go on too long. She said, I trusted your experience more than I should have. I should have stood with my husband sooner, and I should have put Jamie first always. Her mother's face twitched. I was only trying to help. No. My wife said you were trying to stay in control, but this isn't your child. You raised me, but now I'm the parent, and I'm asking you. No, I'm telling you to stop interfering. The room fell into a heavy silence. I watched her, The woman who had once delivered babies, soothed frightened patients, and raised a daughter through tough times. And yet in this moment she looked like a child herself, unsteady, uncertain, maybe even hurt. "You think I'm trying to hurt him?" she asked quietly. "You think I don't care?" "No," I replied. "We think you're letting your pride matter more than his needs, and that has to stop." For a moment, I thought she might argue, that she'd throw some stinging remark our way and storm out. But instead, she just nodded slowly. "I didn't want him to be labeled." She said, her voice tight. "I didn't want him to be the glasses kid to feel different." My wife exhaled deeply. "But he is different, and that's okay. We're not trying to hide that. We're trying to give him everything he needs to see clearly, literally and figuratively." My mother-in-law didn't speak again for a long time. She just sat there absorbing it, her age showing more clearly in the daylight than I'd ever noticed before. Eventually she stood. "I'll respect your wishes," she said, her voice low, "even if I don't agree." "Thank you," my wife said. "That's all we're asking." She left without a hug, without another word to Jamie. But maybe that was for the best. For now. That night, when we told Jamie he'd be wearing his glasses all the time from now on, he didn't resist. He didn't even ask why. He just smiled and said, "I like seeing things sharp." And it hit me then, how fragile a child's world is, how easily it can be blurred by grown-ups projecting their own fears onto it, but now things were coming into focus. For all of us, it's been 3 months since we set that boundary with my mother-in-law. Since the day my wife and I finally stood shoulder to shoulder and chose our son's needs over everyone else's opinions, it hasn't been perfect. The awkward phone calls, the tight-lipped silences during family dinners, the occasional sideways comment from her that still carries an edge of judgment, but she hasn't said another word about the glasses, not to Jamie, not to us. And honestly, that's enough for now. What's more important is this: Jamie wears his glasses every day. No reminders, no resistance. They're a part of him now, like his favorite sneakers, or the lizard keychain he insists on keeping in his backpack. A few weeks ago, his teacher emailed us. She said he was participating more, raising his hand, writing neater. It's like a fog lifted, she wrote. He's more confident, more present. I reread that line 3 times, because she was right. This wasn't just about eyesight, it was about being seen. I think about all the moments we nearly let slide, quiet dismissals, well-meaning interference, 1,000 little justifications that could have allowed a real problem to grow roots. And I think about how easily love can become a blindfold if you're not careful. My wife and I are still finding our rhythm. Parenting as a team means more conversations, more honesty, more moments of uncomfortable truth. But it also means fewer cracks for our kids to fall through. One night, Jamie crawled into bed with us after a nightmare. He curled up between us, tiny glasses still perched on his nose. "I dreamed I couldn't see you," he whispered, voice sleepy and small. I kissed the top of his head and said, "You always will. We'll make sure of it." And for the first time in a long time, I really believed it. If this story struck a chord with you, don't leave without subscribing. Every week, we bring you powerful stories that speak the truth. Others are too afraid to tell. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and be part of a community that sees what really matters.